I love sprouts. Two of my favourite sprouts are called Harold and Margaret. Over 60 years ago, Harold and Margaret Sprout surveyed diplomatic writings to see how geographically deterministic they were. They wanted to see just how widely held the view was in policy circles that simple geospatial factors were the determinants of states' relations with the rest of the world. Writing in the first volume of the Journal of Conflict Resolution, which over the years has become one of the most important journals for the study of war and geography, they found German diplomat Richard von Kuhlmann stating that geographical position and historical development are so largely determining factors of foreign policy that the foreign policy of a country has a natural tendency to return again and again to the same general and fundamental alignment. They found French diplomat Jules Cambon arguing that the geographical position of a nation is the principal factor conditioning its foreign policy. They found a text on sea power claiming England was driven to the sea by her sparse resources. England was destined by geography to command the seas. They found a text on Japan, making the case that the mountains of Japan have pushed the Japanese people out upon the seas, making them the greatest seafaring people of Asia. Geographic isolation, almost inevitably, led Japan to political isolation and crushing defeat in war. They also found a book on resources, believing that the invention of the basic steel furnace led inevitably to Germany's industrial hegemony on the continent. So, geographical determinism is nothing new. Works by authors such as Robert Kaplan are just the latest chapters in a long tradition of simple, naive understandings of the relationship between geography and war. Thankfully, the Sprouts gave us 5 formalised theories to try to explain the relationship between humans and the environment. They certainly weren't the first authors to try to do this. We can date it back to antiquity. Thucydides told us that man does not belong to the land belongs to man. The question takes on a new urgency in the fin de siècle period. In 1897, von Treitschke says that Thucydides overstated his case. We humans are too weak to rise above nature's circumstances, but we may have the ability to overcome some of them. Also in 1897, Theodor Ratzel, who we'll come back to in the course, told us that every state is part mankind and part land. As such, the state is an organism. Writing a year later, Vidal de la Blache takes Ratzel's argument and extends it, saying that man creates the organism. Man is an incomparable biological agent. In 1911, Ratzel's student Ellen Churchill Semple, who we will also come back to, says that man is a product of the Earth's surface. So, it's the relationship between man, or humans, and the environment that the Sprouts want to understand, what they call the man-milieu relationship. The first theory is the simplest: environmental determinism. Environmental cause has a direct effect on humans. We have no choice in the matter. Human history can be explained, therefore, and human future can be predicted. The second theory is called free will environmentalism. This accepts that the environment influences human activities. Nature is a wise guide with a purpose. Humans can ignore nature, but we will suffer for it. The third theory presented by the Sprouts for the relationship between humans and our environment is called environmental possibilism. The environment is a matrix restricting human possibilities. The things we can do are shaped by our environment. Changes in technology allow us to alter our possibilities in relation to the environment. Thus, changes in sailing ship design and ultimately powered ships meant less restriction by the trade winds. Fourth comes cognitive behaviorism. People react to their environment in terms of how they perceive it. Our decisions are not based on how the environment is, but how we imagine it to be. Finally, the final human environment theory the Sprouts give us is called environmental probabilism. We can't possibly predict the actions of individuals, but we can make some inferences based on past events. So, if a traffic light turns red, we can induce, based on previous patterns, that a car will stop at the red light, and we don't need to know anything about the driver's history to be generally right. Similarly, a market analyst may be able to predict roughly how many cars will be sold next year. They'll be less accurate, however, if they try to predict exactly who is going to buy those cars. What the Sprouts then spend much of the next 2 decades doing is explaining how these 5 framings are directly relevant to our understanding of foreign policy, state interaction, and war and peace. I can't possibly get into all of it here, but what I can say is this: the relationship between humans and their environment is complex. Much more complex than saying, there are mountains here, so there will be war. Yet, many writers make these naive assumptions. What I want to do with this course is to say yes, there are lots of ways in which we can look through geographical lenses to understand war and human conflict. But before we do, we need to understand the mistakes some people have made in the past in order that we don't repeat them. Once we know what these mistakes are, we can be on the lookout for them as we apply new methods to find the relationship between geospatial factors and war.